Hello, welcome. Week 22 of the liturgical year, St. Luke 14, and it's Jesus on exaltation or not. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully. Now he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, "When you're invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the place of honor unless someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give your place to this person.' And then you, with shame, will take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, move up higher.' Then you'll be honored in the presence of all who sit at table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." He also said to the man who had invited him, "When you give a dinner or a banquet, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return, and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just." This sounds like one of those stories where Jesus is giving good advice, and it's a sort of tale of moral improvement. Be more humble. And if it was, it wouldn't have very much effect on us, because we're not very good at improving our behavior just because somebody says, "Why did you try and be a bit better?" The problem is that this business of prestige is really about power. It's about power and security, of course. And most of us want to be better defended in the eyes of other people than we feel ourselves to be. The truth is, being a human being is a bit of an existential risk. We can't cope when people gang up on us and look down on us. Social humiliation, even family humiliation, even humiliation by friends, is incredibly painful and very difficult to bear. And just even at a low level, we'd like to do without it. So one of the ways we manage that is by making sure that little signs of invitations to respect come. Actually, in this original text, dear St. Luke uses a Greek word where he talks about, has Jesus described them as constantly jostling for the best place. You get a sense of sort of sharp elbows out and feet being put in front of other people to trip them over. It's quite funny, really. And it's not just a wedding feast. It's any social gathering, although it's translated wedding feast. It's not restricted to wedding invitations. But the of course difficult thing for us is that we find ourselves trying to defend ourselves, and just give us a few more brownie points. I mean, for me, the two things that I know I can see them coming, and I try and resist them. One is the PhD thing, the doctor thing. Do call me doctor. It's just ludicrous. And the other, of course, for me in particular, is once upon a time, many years ago, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. Somehow in my head, I think that brings a degree of... And so at the moment I find myself reaching for these two things, I try and shut up, not do it. And of course, then there's also the fact that I worked for Shush You-Know-Who, which I also try not to mention. But it's not about the things in particular, it's about the instinct to defend ourselves. I found it very helpful when I read this text that I was reminded by a commentary, of course, on St. Paul in Philippians, when it talks about Jesus lowering himself for our sake. The Greek word is kenosis. It's a self-emptying. And when we think of God looking at us, he wants us to know whether we want to be like him. And so we have a choice, don't we? We have to choose between, do we want to be like, well, the most pompous people in the eyes of the people around us? So the fact is, we usually don't respect the people around us that much. Why would we want to be like the people they respect? It's not logical, and it's all born out of fear. Of course it is. We know that. So perhaps there's a way in which we can speak to our fear and re-educate it, theologically speaking. Because if we want to be like God, then what God does is, Jesus, as Paul describes in Philippians, is he emptied and humbled himself, and I mean, he became well. It's beyond conception, isn't it? The maker of the universe, the maker of all love, abandoning himself to us, his silly creatures, and abandoning himself to our power over him, which in the end would kill him. It's an extraordinary reversal and confrontation of what you and I live with every day. This fear of being ganged up on, fear of not being taken seriously, fear of not being loved, fear of not actually being important. So the question is, where do we get our validation from? If we try and get it from one another, we're in trouble. It'll get withdrawn much too easily. As Christians, we've decided to get our validation from God. And we found it precisely because of the way in which he humbled himself for us. We believe in Jesus precisely because he's not Thor. He's not Allah. He's not the grand puppet master in the sky. He's a God who loves us so much he came to find us and put aside everything in order to be alongside us. Once we're caught by that vision, that loveliness, that kindness, that generosity, it gets easier to take risks and not say things like, well, speaking as an academic, because either the things we say are true, in which case our listeners will hear them, or they're not, in which case more fool us. But wrapping them up in status of any kind, whatever your favorite status is, isn't going to achieve anything. It's even self-defeating, in fact. So for us, the more we look at Jesus, the more we may find the confidence not to look for artificial levers of power to defend ourselves. There is something really quite wonderful and beautiful about Jesus, and the journey we're on is becoming like him. The fathers talk about our being made in the image and likeness of God. Well, we're all made in the image of God, which is why you don't kill people, which is why you give honor to people. The whole business of chivalry and giving way to people is not a form of weakness, as the Middle Eastern cultures think, as Islam thinks. It actually comes from having caught a vision of God. But what we need to do is move from being just in the image to being in the likeness of God. And being in the likeness of God involves trusting that love and humility are strong enough to give us that degree of existential protection, affirmation, and self-interpretation. How do we do this? Well, with great difficulty. I never stop finding myself reaching for my credentials. It doesn't stop. It's hardwired into us as human beings. I think this is what we mean part of what we mean when we talk about original sin. We never grow out of it. We never grow beyond it. We never grow big enough. We never grow holy enough. It's a constant struggle. So the only way we can win the struggle, or at least take part in the struggle, is by loving Jesus, by looking at him and loving him. By loving him particularly on the cross. That's why the Christ on the crucifix is such a revolutionary and astonishing symbol. It reverses all social order, all social etiquette, all the angst and fear that flow from one human being to another as we struggle to make ourselves safe in each other's company, which we can't do. So this is not Jesus telling off people. There's at the very beginning, the Greek word is he observes. He's not condemning or criticizing. He's observing the constant jostling. And I've got a very funny story about a bishop and a very posh girls' public school where I was a part-time chaplain for a while. Well, just to put it very briefly, the bishop misbehaved really quite badly. bringing great difficulty to the headmistress and the staff with a degree of overdeveloped piety that reflected very well on him as a bishop, but made things very difficult for the school. And the headmistress said to me with about 5 minutes to go to a big public event where this was going to Gavin sort it out. Well, it got sorted. And then there was a very, very big posh public school tea party afterwards. And the poor bishop was demoted to go and sit with the cleaners. And I was put on the table with the governors. I should really have been on the table with the cleaners, of course. And well, I think it's probably the only time in my life when actually I've been asked up higher. I don't think the bishop minded. He was very good. He enjoyed evangelizing the cleaners. He was good at that kind of thing. So no harm was done. But our Lord's right, just at a practical level. We shouldn't build ourselves too high a platform, lest we fall. But allow it to others to give us whatever dignity they want to give us. We can't force it or trick them. But most importantly, to be so convinced that the way of love is the most profoundly authentic way of living, that we're willing to take the risk of putting ourselves at the bottom of the pecking order and being content, because at least down there we'll find ourselves in the company of Jesus. And really, where else would we want to be?